They say family is everything, but what happens when that bond is built on one-sided sacrifices? For the past year, I had supported my younger sister, Riley, when she lost her job and had nowhere to go. I let her move into my home rent-free, cooked for her, cleaned up after her, and gave her the space to rebuild her life. I never asked for anything in return. I thought that's what family did. But the moment she no longer needed me, she made it painfully clear how little I actually mattered. It all unraveled 2 weeks ago when her boyfriend, Alex, proposed. She had been struggling for over a year, yet somehow, as soon as she had a ring on her finger, everything magically fell into place. She moved in with Alex, and for the first time in a long time, I finally had my home back. But the real gut punch came when I found out she had thrown an engagement party and never invited me. I confronted her, expecting some kind of excuse, maybe even an apology. Instead, she rolled her eyes and said, "You weren't really that helpful. Honestly, you just made me feel like a burden." That was it. The moment I realized I had wasted an entire year of my life on someone who had never appreciated me in the first place. Riley and I were never best friends growing up. She was always our mother's favorite, the one who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, the one expected to handle everything. So, when she lost her marketing job and got evicted, our mom called me, saying, "She just needs a little help. It won't be forever." I should have known better. At first, I was happy to help. My husband and I had stable jobs and a home big enough for an extra person. But weeks turned into months, and Riley barely lifted a finger to improve her situation. She had no job, no responsibilities, and no urgency to change that. While I worked long hours, she stayed up late watching TV, scrolling through social media, and going out with friends. Every time I brought up job hunting, she had an excuse. "The market is bad. I need time to figure things out. You don't understand how hard this is." Oh, I understood perfectly. She wasn't even trying. She was just coasting on my generosity. Then, a month ago, my husband and I found out I was pregnant. We were overjoyed, but we also knew it meant big changes. We needed Riley to move out so we could turn her room into a nursery. I wasn't looking forward to the conversation, but as it turned out, I didn't even need to bring it up. Alex, Riley's boyfriend, came to me for advice on proposing. He had also been laid off last year, but had recently landed a new job. His plan was to save for a few months before getting an apartment, then propose. That's when I had an idea. I told him, "Propose now, get an apartment right away, and I'll cover Riley's rent for the first few months." Was it manipulative? Maybe. But I needed her gone before my second trimester, and this was the least dramatic way to make that happen. Alex agreed, and within weeks, everything fell into place. He found an apartment, proposed, and Riley moved in with him. Finally, I could breathe. I didn't expect a thank you speech, but I at least thought I'd be invited to the engagement party. Instead, I found out through Instagram. When I confronted her, she shrugged and said, "I don't need you anymore. And honestly, you were suffocating me." I stood there, stunned. After everything I had done housing her, feeding her, covering her expenses, this was how she repaid me. Not only was she ungrateful, but she was also cruel. And then, as if that wasn't enough, she blocked me. That was the moment I decided, no more favors. I picked up my phone and called Alex. Calmly, I let him know that our deal was off. If Riley wanted to be independent, she could prove it. I wouldn't be paying her rent anymore. Alex panicked. Their new apartment was already stretching his finances thin, and without my help, he wasn't sure how they'd manage. I told him that wasn't my problem. I was done being used. I won't lie, there was something deeply satisfying about hearing the panic in Alex's voice when I told him I wasn't covering Riley's rent anymore. For once, someone else would have to deal with the mess she created. And, honestly, it wasn't even about the money. It was about respect. I had given Riley a place to live, supported her when she had nothing, and in return, she had the audacity to throw me aside like I was nothing. She had made it clear that she didn't need me, so why should I continue bending over backward for her? After that call, I blocked her too. I was done. If she wanted to play the independent, successful fiancé, then she could figure it out on her own. But of course, nothing is ever that simple. I should have known that Riley wouldn't just disappear quietly. A few days later, my mom called me, her voice dripping with disappointment. "What's wrong with you? You put your own sister in a terrible position. She and Alex are struggling because of you." I laughed. Actually laughed. After everything I'd done for Riley, suddenly I was the villain. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom, I let her live with me for a year, rent-free. I paid for her food. I even set up her move-out plan. And how did she thank me? She cut me off. She didn't even invite me to her engagement party. So yeah, I backed out of our deal. That's on her, not me. Silence. Then, a sigh. You should have just talked to her instead of making things worse. I rolled my eyes. Like you talked to me when you sent her an allowance every month, instead of encouraging her to get a job? That shut her up. Truth was, my mom had been enabling Riley from the start. While I had been trying to push her toward independence, my mom had been making sure she never had to take responsibility. No wonder Riley felt so entitled. She's your sister, Mom finally said. You're supposed to help each other. Funny, I shot back, because that help never seems to go both ways. That was the last conversation we had for a while. At first, I didn't hear much about how Riley and Alex were handling things. I assumed she would just run back to my mom and have her fix the situation. But then, something interesting happened. Alex called me. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. Hey, he started, sounding hesitant. I wanted to say I get it now. I raised an eyebrow. Get what? Why you were so frustrated with Riley. She doesn't do anything. She doesn't cook. She doesn't clean. She doesn't even try to find a job. She just sits around all day like she's waiting for something to magically change. I smirked. Yeah, welcome to my life for the past year. He sighed. I thought things would be different once we moved in together. I thought maybe she was just struggling because she was at your place, but she's not even trying. I stayed quiet, letting him process it. I don't know what to do, he admitted. We're behind on rent already. I thought she'd at least pitch in with groceries or something, but she keeps saying she's figuring things out. I leaned back in my chair, taking in his words. You could give her an ultimatum. Either she finds a job, or she moves back in with my mom. I did, he admitted. She started crying, saying she just needed more time, that I wasn't being supportive. I felt guilty, so I dropped it. Classic Riley. Make herself the victim, deflect responsibility. Look, Alex, I said, I don't know what to tell you. I spent a year dealing with this exact behavior. If you want to keep enabling her, that's on you. But I'm done. He sighed again. Yeah, I figured. The next day, Riley unblocked me. I knew exactly what that meant. Sure enough, a few hours later, I got a text. Hey, can we talk? I ignored it. An hour later, another text. I miss you. I'm sorry. So now she was sorry? Now that Alex wasn't picking up her slack? Now that she realized she couldn't afford to ignore me anymore? I didn't respond. Then she called. I let it go to voicemail. Another text. Please, I really need to talk to you. I took a deep breath, then finally replied. Why? You made it clear you didn't need me anymore. Her response came fast. I was upset. I didn't mean it. Right? Just like she hadn't meant to block me. Hadn't meant to cut me out of her life the second she didn't need me. I wasn't buying it. I don't think we have anything to talk about, Riley. Please. Just once. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to shut her out the way she had shut me out. But another part of me, the part that had spent years being the good sister, still felt a tiny bit guilty. So, against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. We met at a small cafe near my apartment. She looked different, more tired, less put together. She fidgeted with her coffee cup, avoiding eye contact. I messed up, she finally said. I stayed silent, waiting. She sighed. I should have invited you to the engagement party, and I shouldn't have said what I did. I was just overwhelmed. I crossed my arms. Overwhelmed by what? Living in my house for free while I paid your bills? She winced. I didn't realize how much you were doing for me until I moved out. And now that you do? I asked. She hesitated. I need your help. Of course she did. I leaned forward, looking her dead in the eye. No. Her head snapped up. What? No, I repeated. I'm not bailing you out, Riley. You made your choice. Now live with it. Her face crumpled, but I didn't care. For the first time in our lives, I wasn't going to be the safety net she could fall back on. Riley stared at me like I had just slapped her. Maybe, in a way, I had. She had expected me to cave, to swoop in and save her like I always had. But this time, I wasn't playing along. You're really going to turn your back on me? She whispered, voice shaking. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. No, Riley. You turned your back on me first. Remember? She swallowed hard. eyes darting to the side like she was searching for the right words. I wasn't thinking straight. I was overwhelmed. I made mistakes. And now you expect me to just forget all of that? I asked. She was silent. That was the thing with Riley. She had always relied on people's forgiveness. She'd cross a line, burn a bridge, and then, when things got tough, she'd act like none of it had ever happened. She wanted a reset button, but I wasn't handing her one. So, what now? I asked after a long pause. You and Alex are struggling, and you need help. That it? She nodded, looking small and defeated. I didn't think it would be this hard. I almost laughed. Of course, she hadn't. Riley had spent a year living off me without a second thought. She never had to check a budget, never worried about rent or bills. Now, reality was hitting her, and she wanted out. I sighed, rubbing my temples. What do you want me to do, Riley? Pay your rent again? Let you move back in? She hesitated, but the answer was clear in her eyes. That's not happening, I said firmly. I have a baby on the way. My focus is on my family now. Her jaw tightened. I'm your family too. I nodded. Yeah. And where was my family when I needed them? She had no answer for that. 2 days later, my mom called me. Again. I debated ignoring it, but I knew she'd just keep trying, so I picked up. You need to forgive your sister, she said, skipping right past a greeting. I sighed. Did she call you crying? She's struggling, Mom said, voice tight. And I don't understand why you're being so harsh. I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to stay calm. Mom, Riley made her choice. She cut me off. She moved out. She made it clear she didn't need me. Now she's realizing she does, and I'm supposed to pretend none of it happened? You're her sister, Mom snapped. You're supposed to be there for her. That was rich, coming from her. I took a deep breath. You know what, Mom? I'm done with this conversation. Riley is an adult. She needs to take responsibility for herself. But I hung up. Maybe it was petty, but I didn't care. I was tired of the guilt trips. The next morning, I got a text from Alex. Alex, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you for meeting with Riley. She told me how it went. I stared at my phone, debating if I even wanted to reply. Then, another message. Alex, I know things between you two are bad, but I just wanted to say I understand why you're upset. I do too. That caught my attention. Me, what do you mean? A few seconds later, my phone rang. I answered hesitantly. I think I made a mistake, Alex said before I could even speak. I thought Riley just needed time to adjust, but she's not changing. She refuses to look for a job. She won't help with anything around the apartment. She spends money like we're not already behind on bills. I exhaled sharply. That sounds familiar. I don't know what to do, he admitted. I love her, but I can't keep doing this. I'm working overtime just to stay afloat while she sits at home like nothing's wrong. I hesitated. So, what are you saying? A heavy silence. Then I think I need to break off the engagement. I didn't expect to feel bad for Riley, but for a second, I actually did. She had built this fantasy in her head that she could float through life without ever taking real responsibility. That someone would always be there to catch her. But now even Alex had reached his limit. Are you sure? I asked. He sighed. I don't see another option. I've talked to her. I've begged her to contribute. She just doesn't care. I had been in his shoes. I knew exactly how draining it was to beg someone to take responsibility for themselves. Then you need to do what's best for you, I said. He exhaled sharply. Yeah, I think I do. A week later, my phone lit up with a message from Riley. Riley, Alex left me. I stared at the screen, feeling an odd mix of emotions. I wasn't happy about it, but I also wasn't surprised. Riley, he said he's tired of doing everything on his own. That I don't try hard enough. Can you believe that? Actually, yes. Riley, I have nowhere to go. Can I stay with you? I took a deep breath. Me? No, Riley. I told you before. I can't help you anymore. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, finally, Riley, so that's it? You're just done with me? I hesitated. Me? I'm not done with you, Riley. But I'm done being your safety net. You need to figure things out for yourself. I expected anger. Maybe even tears. Instead, she just responded with, Riley, okay, that was it. No begging. No guilt trip. Just, okay. For the first time in years, it felt like maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand. Riley's simple. Okay, sat in my inbox like a loose thread. For years, I had expected dramatic reactions from her tears, guilt trips, or an emotional breakdown. But this time, she didn't fight back. That should have been a relief. Instead, it left me unsettled. Had she really accepted that I was done saving her, or was she just waiting to find another way out? Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. For the first time in forever, Riley wasn't flooding my phone with messages. No sarcastic texts, no guilt-tripping calls, no late-night rants about how unfair life was. She had gone silent. A few weeks passed, and despite my better judgment, I found myself wondering what she was up to. Had she gone crawling back to our mom, found a new safety net? Or was she actually standing on her own for once? I wasn't about to ask, but fate had other plans. One Saturday morning, I heard a knock at my door. My husband was out running errands, and I was curled up on the couch, savoring the rare moment of peace. When I opened the door, my stomach dropped. Riley. She looked different. Her usually styled hair was pulled back into a messy bun. Her clothes, always trendy and polished, were wrinkled and plain. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't have that entitled glint in her eyes. She looked exhausted. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She sat on the couch, staring down at her hands. For a while, she didn't say anything. Finally, she took a deep breath. I was wrong. I raised an eyebrow. "About?" She swallowed hard. "Everything." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. I thought I could handle things on my own, that I didn't need help, but I was just running from responsibility. And now I don't know what to do. For the first time in forever, she wasn't making excuses. She wasn't blaming me, Alex, or the universe. She was finally taking responsibility. Riley told me everything. After Alex left, she had tried to stay in the apartment, thinking she could manage. But with no job and no savings, she fell behind on rent fast. Eventually, the landlord had enough and kicked her out. She went back to our mom's house, but that didn't last long either. Mom was different this time, she admitted. She told me I had to figure things out on my own, that she wasn't going to keep paying for me forever. I blinked. "Mom said that?" She nodded. "Yeah." Guess she finally realized I wasn't going to change if she kept bailing me out. I leaned back, trying to process that. Our mom had spent years enabling Riley. For her to suddenly cut her off? That was huge. "So where have you been staying?" I asked. She let out a bitter laugh. "Couch surfing. A friend let me crash for a while, but that didn't last. I've been staying in my car for the past week." That hit me harder than I expected. No matter how much resentment I had built up, Riley was still my sister. And hearing that she had been sleeping in her car, that stung. I sighed, rubbing my temples. "What do you want from me, Riley?" She met my eyes. Advice? That surprised me. For the first time, she wasn't asking for money or a place to stay. She just wanted guidance. That was new. I nodded slowly. "All right. First things first, you need a job. Any job. You don't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect opportunity." She nodded. "I know. And you need to start budgeting. No more reckless spending. No more acting like money just appears when you need it." Another nod. "And most importantly, you need to prove to yourself, to me, to everyone that you can stand on your own." This time she didn't just nod, she swallowed hard and whispered, "I want to." For the first time in a long time, I actually believed her. The next week, Riley got a job at a local cafe. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. She found a cheap room to rent, something small but manageable. She even started paying off her debts slowly, but steadily. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, moments where she wanted to quit. But this time, she didn't run. She didn't make excuses. She kept going. And I let her. I didn't swoop in to fix everything. I didn't make it easier. I just stood back and watched as she finally grew up. A few months later, Riley called me. "I just got promoted," she said, pride clear in her voice. "It's not much, but it's something." I smiled. "I'm proud of you, Riley." She was silent for a moment, then said, "I know I don't deserve it, but do you think we could start over?" I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the anger, the frustration. But I also thought about how much she had changed. "Yeah," I said softly. "I think we can. Maybe, just maybe, we could be sisters again." Riley's voice had been different on that call, not desperate, not defensive, just real. For the first time in years, she wasn't expecting anything from me. No handouts, no shortcuts, just a second chance. And honestly, I wanted to give it to her. I wasn't naive. I knew we'd never go back to how things were when we were kids, before life turned us into two very different people. But maybe, just maybe, we could find some middle ground. Maybe we could be sisters again. We started small. Riley and I met for coffee one Saturday morning. No tension, no forced apologies, just two people catching up after years of resentment and silence. She told me about her job, how she had moved up from cashier to assistant manager at the cafe. It wasn't her dream career, but she was proud of herself. "It's the first time I've ever truly supported myself," she admitted, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "It's not easy, but I like knowing that I can." I nodded, genuinely happy for her. "It suits you." She smiled, a little unsure. "You really think so?" I did. The Riley sitting across from me wasn't the same person I had kicked out of my home. She was different, humbled, grounded, and for the first time, I actually enjoyed talking to her. That was new. Things with Riley were improving, but my relationship with our mom, that was a different story. She had been quiet ever since our last argument, which, honestly, was a relief. But I knew that silence wouldn't last forever. Sure enough, a few weeks later, she called. "I heard you've been talking to Riley again." I kept my voice neutral. "Yeah, I have." A pause. "That's good." "She's been trying, you know." I sighed. "Yeah, Mom, I know." Another pause, then hesitantly, "And what about us?" That was the real question, wasn't it? "I don't know," I admitted. "You weren't exactly supportive when I needed you." She exhaled sharply. "I know, and I'm sorry for that, but I didn't know how to handle everything. Riley always needed more from me, and I guess I just assumed you'd be fine on your own." That stung. "That's not how family works, Mom," I said quietly. "You don't just ignore the kid who doesn't ask for help. You check in anyway." She was silent. I didn't say it to hurt her, I just wanted her to understand. "I can't pretend none of it happened," I continued. "But if you really want to fix things, then show me. Put in the effort. Actually listen to me, not just Riley." Her voice was thick with emotion when she finally spoke. "Okay." One night, Riley called me, her voice full of excitement. "I got a new job." She had applied for a position at a marketing firm, not the same level as her old job, but a step in the right direction. And she got it. "I start next month," she said. "And they're paying me more than I ever made before. I can finally start saving, maybe even get my own apartment." I grinned. "I'm really proud of you, Riley." And I meant it. She had finally stopped waiting for life to hand her things. She was building something for herself, piece by piece. A few months later, my daughter was born. It was the hardest, most exhausting, most incredible experience of my life. And when I looked around the hospital room, I saw the people who mattered. My husband, his parents, my mom, and Riley. She had been there the whole time, waiting, holding my hand when the contractions got too strong, reassuring me when I thought I couldn't do it. When my baby finally arrived, she cried harder than I did. Later, as she held my daughter in her arms, she whispered, "I won't mess this up again." And for the first time, I believed her. Having Riley at the hospital that day felt surreal. If someone had told me months ago that she'd be holding my hand through labor, I would have laughed in their face. But there she was crying harder than anyone, whispering to my newborn daughter that she would be the best aunt in the world. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. But rebuilding trust isn't like flipping a switch. It doesn't happen overnight. The first few weeks after bringing my daughter home were a blur of sleepless nights, baby cries, and trying to figure out how to function on 2 hours of sleep. My husband was exhausted, but amazing. His family was a huge help, bringing meals, cleaning up, giving us moments to breathe. Then, one day, Riley showed up. Not unannounced, not expecting anything, just there. She stood in my doorway, holding a bag of groceries. "I figured you probably haven't had time to shop," she said awkwardly. She wasn't wrong. I let her in, still unsure of where we stood, but grateful nonetheless. She didn't push, didn't overstay. She just stocked the fridge, held the baby for a bit, and left. It was the first time she had ever done something for me, without expecting anything in return. As the weeks passed, Riley started coming by more often. At first, it was just to check in, dropping off food, folding laundry while we talked. But then, something shifted. One evening, as she rocked my daughter to sleep, she looked up at me and asked, Do you remember when we used to build forts out of bed sheets? I blinked, caught off guard by the memory. We had been kids, just the two of us, back when our family felt simpler. We'd stack chairs, drape blankets over them, and pretend we were hiding from some imaginary enemy. Back then, we had been a team. I smiled. Yeah, Mom hated when we used the good sheets. Riley chuckled. She still brings it up sometimes. It was a small moment, but it reminded me that before the resentment, the fights, the years of tension, there had been love. Maybe there could be again. One night, a few months later, Riley and I sat on my couch, both of us exhausted. My daughter had finally fallen asleep, and for once, there was silence. Then, out of nowhere, Riley spoke. I need to say something. I looked over at her, waiting. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry. Not just for the engagement party, or blocking you, or even the rent thing. I'm sorry for all of it. For every time I made you feel like you didn't matter. For making you the responsible one while I got to be the screw-up. For assuming you'd always take care of things. I was selfish, and I hurt you. And I don't expect you to forget that, but I just needed to say it. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear that until that moment. I let out a slow breath, feeling some of the weight I had carried for years start to lift. Thank you, I said softly. Riley swallowed. Do you think we'll ever be close again? I thought about it. About everything we had been through, all the damage that couldn't be erased. Then I looked at my daughter, asleep in my arms, and I thought about the kind of family I wanted her to grow up in. I think we're getting there, I admitted. Months passed, and things continued to shift. Riley had her own place now, a tiny apartment, but hers. She still worked at the marketing firm, and was even talking about going back to school. She had started building something for herself, something real. And our mom, she was trying too. She didn't play favorites anymore, didn't make excuses for Riley, and for once, she actually listened when I spoke. We weren't perfect. There were still moments of frustration, still pieces of the past we hadn't fully worked through, but we were moving forward. And that was enough. One day, Riley stopped by with a surprise. She pulled a bundle of fabric from her bag and grinned. What's this? I asked. She spread it out, revealing a small, handmade play tent. It's for her, she said, nodding toward my daughter, so she can have her own forts. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Riley wasn't just trying to fix the present, she was trying to bring back the best parts of our past. I smiled, blinking back tears. She's going to love it. And for the first time in years, I knew without a doubt, so would I. Story 2. After they ridiculed my injured spouse, who was recuperating from a horrific injury, I ejected my unemployed brother and his expectant girlfriend from my home. I realize this sounds awful, but please be patient with me. Being the only male in our family, my brother 24M was undoubtedly treated better than my elder sister and I as we grew up. I'm not sure about other Asian families. Since my father paid for our tuition until we graduated, our beloved mother believed it would be a good idea to have my sister and I pay for my brother's college tuition when our father passed away just before he finished from high school. I don't make a lot of money, just so you know. Although it's above average, I'm not exactly rich. I also put in a lot of overtime. The current state of the economy is dire. I'm married now. At 20:08 a.m., I proposed to this stunning man. Since middle school, I've known. After he had a horrific accident that nearly destroyed his motor abilities, I vowed to marry him if he woke up during the 2 weeks he spent in a coma. So I did. I keep my word as a lady. After all, the accident also cost him his job. However, he continues to get money from his investments. Additionally, his parents gave him one of their properties to later rent out. Indeed, even if they are not having financial difficulties, his parents are laden with capital L. He had lost all he knew, including his work and his active outdoor activities, and I continued to see him sink into a profound sadness. For about a year, he was unable to walk, and even with his cane, he's still unable to stand or walk for extended periods of time. Up until almost a month before our wedding, he was in a bad place. We've been married for about a year now, and I can already see the sparkle returning to his eyes. He became so passionate about baking and cooking that we completely remodeled our kitchen to accommodate a larger oven and house all of his baking supplies. I appreciate that he is actively looking into how to obtain permission to open a bakery. Even after consuming sourdough bread for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 3 weeks. Let's go back to my brother. By chance, he and his partner became parents. After graduating 2 years ago, he is presently looking for a job. Soon after graduating from college, he launched a firm. However, you are likely aware of how that works. It failed after he wasted nearly all of the inheritance that our father had given us, his 3 children. He and my eldest sister were estranged as a result. After Dad paid his tuition, he also wasted her portion of the inheritance, so I don't blame my sister for being upset. Additionally, if you are familiar with Asian homes, you are aware that the oldest daughter has the most challenges. The unintended pregnancy has also caused him and our mother to not get along very well. Although she's not precisely against his girlfriend, she's also not very excited about her. But she asked me, since he's still the golden kid, to let my brother and his girlfriend to remain in our home until he gets employment. According to her recently married daughter, she thought it would be simpler for him to acquire a job here because I live in a large city. In order to accommodate them, I asked my husband if I might rent one of his rooms. Being the perfect angel that he is, my husband suggested that he look into remodeling one of his homes, because the ones he now owns aren't really ideal for long-term living with a baby. When it was completed, they could move in and just begin making rent payments. When my brother found employment, they could remain in our guest room upstairs. In the meanwhile, I've read about how circumstances like this are surefire ways to end badly. I should have listened. Darn it. Sometime before Christmas, they moved in. They both did as little as possible around the house. Pots and pans are left for us to clean. They only wash the smaller items, such as plates, glasses, and bowls. All they did was their own laundry. They would check the refrigerator and pantry, but never replenish anything. I didn't even get to sample. My husband's baked goodies on several days. The ones he reserved especially for me would be eaten by them. I knew my spouse didn't use the dishes I had to wash. I am still a friggin' resident even after working 2 straight shifts at the hospital. Despite filling it to overflowing, they never clean the second floor where they stayed or assist with taking out the garbage. Normally, I would assist him with it whenever I had free time, but I had seen my husband putting out the garbage several times as soon as I arrived home. Come on. Even if I don't expect them to clean the entire home. As they did nothing, I watched my husband stutter around on his cane, cleaning dishes and bringing out the garbage. That is simply impolite, especially when they don't have to pay rent. Naturally, I responded to them with a mild and diluted kind of bro. If you can't even assist with taking out the garbage, you won't be hired. You can at least wash the dishes you use, even if they insist you're pregnant. Since you each have 2 hands, you can clean the kitchenware you need to prepare meals. Make the dream a reality. After then, they marginally improved. They don't bother putting their dishes back in the drawers after washing them all. However, hey, advancement. This is the tipping moment. My mother and older sister paid me a visit around Chinese New Year. My husband's food was extravagant. I prepared the other guest room for my family and cleaned the entire house. I discovered then that the second floor had not been swept in a very long time. Only when my family came did my brother and his girlfriend leave their room. After exchanging pleasantries, we went down to eat and handed my mother her New Year's bow. At that point, chaos ensued. With an air of confidence right out of his collar, my brother even declared that because my husband can again walk, it's time for him to get a real job again. I'm younger, but I'm working hard to find a job, he continued. Then, without intending to offend, he remarked that cooking is a strange pastime for a huge man, 6'3", similar to him. Furthermore, he lacks the necessary skill. In response, his girlfriend said she believes her husband is more feminine than she is since he cooks better and takes better care of the house. If she's the norm, then the bar is obviously someplace below Satan's throne. She further said that she and my brother are always questioning my husband about why he is still at home after his injury occurred years ago, and that if he continues to be pent up in the house, I will soon leave him. Then she said that my husband never answered them, always ever grinning at them. My brother swiftly backtracked, claiming it was just once or twice, which suggests he even understood she had made a mistake. I just got up, grabbed both of their plates, and ordered them to get out. I was unable to even look at my spouse. I felt embarrassed and furious with them. It required all of my self-control not to cuss them out at that precise moment. They said that I was overreacting to innocuous remarks. My mother attempted to defuse the issue by claiming that my brother and his girlfriend had good intentions and that their remarks weren't hurtful. She even mentioned that my husband didn't appear to be offended. "Why ruin a good day?" she questioned, which I choose to ignore. I wanted them gone so badly that I even gave them my car keys. After offering my husband pathetic apologies, they departed with my eldest sister. According to her, they spent the night at a motel before going back to my mother's house the next day. My brother's belongings were picked up by my older sister. The only person who believes I made the correct decision is her, and she laughed a lot about the entire experience. My husband acknowledged that he was happy that I stood up for him, but he never took offense since he knows that I enjoy what he does. He therefore implied that I could have been a bit severe. Later, my mother informed me that their remarks were insufficient justification for evicting my suffering brother and his expectant fiancé. She made a big deal out her being pregnant. "I could have reprimanded him as I did over the dishes," she added. "Yes, he also talked about that. I don't believe I'm overreacting or that I am the asshole yet. To be honest, I'm still mad. But now, since even my spouse was so laid back about it, I'm starting to doubt myself. Am I the jerk?" OP responded to comments. One NTA commented, "Your brother stole your inheritance. He is a thief. He knocked up his girlfriend and is a lazy ass. It is ineffective, insulting to your house and your husband, and a terrible guest while he is staying for free. You allowed things to proceed for too long and were too nice. You weren't overly severe. Activities. Words have repercussions. Never, ever do anything for your brother. He is entitled, especially due of your mother. But all of you have been complicit. OP, you're correct, now that I consider it. I also had a part in making it possible for him. I learnt my lesson, and never again. In any case, I appreciate your comment. NTA, the second commenter. Well done for defending your spouse and, hopefully, for educating your lazy and ungrateful brother and his girlfriend that they need to take responsibility for their actions after choosing to become pregnant. They were staying at your place for free, therefore I find it unbelievable that they had the gall to say such things. OP. My brother didn't take the key, which I believe I should have mentioned. The person who took them out of the home was my sister. Thus, the vehicle is secure in my garage. Even the gas was poured by her. NTA commenter 3. Given how strongly she feels about it, your mom is able to take them in. Keep your personal space and your close family safe, which includes your husband rather than your brother and his girlfriend, who are most likely intentionally knocked up. Your husband's improvement will regress if he is surrounded by harmful individuals. When you are not there, just think of what people say to him. Screw them. That's also my major concern. In fact, I kind of questioned my spouse about it. For example, did they say something without me there? Why wouldn't he tell me anyway? Behind my back, they said offensive things. He said that because of his speech issues, he was too lethargic to talk, but he did reprimand him once, sort of. He claimed to have been joking when he said it, but his remarks were rather critical, and he surmised that this was the reason my brother had brought it up at the family meal. February 4, 2025, update. Hi there. I never imagined that I would update my narrative. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who took the time to read my lengthy article and leave kind comments, as I was pleasantly pleased to see so many responses when I got up this morning. In fact, my husband and I looked through everyone's answers together last night. He even flushed a little at the comments that called him a saint, and he expressed gratitude for the encouraging sentiments. It was adorable. Don't let him know that I told you all about it. Additionally, I made an effort to respond to everyone, but after an hour, I gave up since I lacked the mental and motor capacity to do so. Although I included an update in the headline, this post will mostly be an explanation. In order to accomplish that, I would want to address some of the queries that I frequently received in my last post. First, was my automobile returned to me? My automobile was never taken by him. My sister did. She drove it to a motel after taking it out. Thus, my vehicle is secure in my garage. 2. What made me allow him to enter my home? To be honest, I don't have a close relationship with my family. If the Asian family norm is followed, you can infer the reason. I had already moved out by then because I was a boarding high school student as well. I can count on one hand the number of times throughout my time in college when I only returned home for a week or less for the new year. I would search for part-time work during breaks from school in order to avoid returning home. Additionally, I didn't communicate with him very much, and when I did, I just knew him as a mama's boy and a spoiled brat. He has never said anything hurtful to me or acted inappropriately previously. After my father, I think, since I was the one who repeatedly reprimanded him and made him apologize to his mother or elder sister following the death of our father, he is the most suspicious of me. I never thought he would say or do something so ridiculous because of this. Before my mother asked me to let him remain, I thought he would get a job quickly because he too received outstanding scores from a reputable institution. In fact, she asked me to pay for his wedding. In hell, Snowball's chance, notwithstanding her statement that it didn't have to be a significant one. Hell, no. Still, making me pay for it will be more difficult than dividing her hair into 7 separate halves. I thus make a concession by allowing him to stay till he finds employment in order to prevent a protracted and tiresome round of nagging and complaining. That was one of my worst mistakes. 3. I agreed to pay his tuition, but why? I gave him my portion of the inheritance, but why? His tuition wasn't precisely covered by me. Our father gave us an inheritance, as I have stated. I instructed my mom to use my portion to cover my brother's tuition. At the time, I assumed that if I ever touched the money, she would want something in exchange. Therefore, I would prefer not to. If she believes that our attendance at school is a transaction, then I thought it would be the same for everything else. That money never crossed my mind. Mine. So I don't lose. However, since the bequest was meant to pay for our future weddings, I really had to stay away from her for a few months after my brother started college. She soon caved in after Mia forced him to apologize and pledged to reimburse our oldest sister when he failed his companies, even though I did sit him down. However, since I had given my mother my approval, which I suppose makes him equal, it was not my place to pardon or chastise him. Use my portion. Upon reflection, I ought to have at least notified him that my sister was slapping me. Why does my spouse lack a backbone? As several of you have said, I'm sorry. My husband's spine is made of titanium, both literally and metaphorically. Just kidding. I am aware that I didn't do much in that area since I was preoccupied with events that occurred before, and at the peak of the issue, I thought my piece was about what I did to them and why, so I didn't focus as much on the fallout or my husband's viewpoint. Immediately following that supper, I questioned him about why he hadn't told me that those toilet lid coverings had been offensive to him, and whether he had truly said nothing. I believed my brother and his girlfriend when they stated he didn't reply at all, and he was rather offended. No, he reprimanded them once while I was on call around the new year. Indeed, life is awful. He said something like, "Bro, even if we're both unemployed, I'm still richer than you. My wife is a doctor, and she proposed to me when I was at my weakest. My life is going well. Get a job, please." Written by myself, in my own words, because he was unable to recall the exact words he used. He said that when he stated this, he was laughing. My brother may not have taken him seriously because of this. My brother may still be harmed, though. He uttered such things during supper, for that reason. But to be honest, it seems frightening to me when I picture my spouse speaking in that manner. It just gets worse when you laugh. It's a little warm, though. However, that is TMI. He didn't take it personally and was too lazy to mention it, which is why he didn't tell me. He said that he still finds it challenging to pronounce several words correctly. He made a comparison between the remarks made by my brother and his girlfriend and those made by the huskies next door. A very attractive dog. By the way, why bother? It's already in their nature. However, I did advise him to notify me the next time someone treats him disrespectfully so that I can utilize the taekwondo skills I acquired in primary school. Don't expect much though, as I just received 2 yellow belts. Though he doesn't show it, I believe he's happy with what I accomplished. Don't ask me why. 5. What am I doing to help him? I did examine that, as I mentioned in one of my responses, and I believe that avoiding my family as much as possible might be interpreted as me aiding him. I'll argue that since I'm not his mom, I shouldn't be responsible for raising him. However, I accept responsibility for not hitting him hard enough. Maturing. He most likely has some loose screws because of this. That concludes the Q&A session I created myself. Only a week has passed since CNY, and not much has occurred. The most noteworthy is that, With my husband's permission, I have banned my mother and brother on both of our phones after she attempted to reach him separately yesterday to inquire about the room we planned to remodel. He's already informed his parents, so the renovations are still ongoing, but he will just rent it out to someone else later because there are likely other people who need and deserve it. When he informed me about it, I just banned her on his phone without responding. As he assured me that he was okay and unaffected, he genuinely continued asking if it was truly acceptable to break off my family in such a drastic way. Each time this subject is brought up. For that reason, I was doubting myself. Don't worry though, my husband's ancestors created the turtle ship and my ancestors built the Great Wall of China. I've already made a mental, emotional, and spiritual commitment to never change my views. I will just consider my brother and mother to be that hair on your butt. It's there, but it's not necessary. The feeling will be much better once you pluck it. I never cared to inquire during my phone conversations with my sister, so I don't know anything else about my brother and his girlfriend. However, as several of you mentioned, it's no longer my concern, because I put my marriage above my family. I did hear my mother call my boy insane. You can probably tell where I got it though, because I'm her daughter. After reading my last post, we had several discussions and covered a wide range of topics from each other's points of view during our relationship. I also asked him if he ever considered leaving me after the entire situation, which I acknowledge was incredibly awful for him, and I apologized once more. In response, he asked me whether I recalled urging him to just lose weight after I proposed to him wearing a band that was too large since I had purchased an Asian couple's ring that was the same size. That's how sentimental some of us are. Don't pass judgment on me. He asked a few days after he woke up, why would he even consider leaving me when I did everything in my power to stand by him now? If I had stepped forward to stay with him while he could do nothing at all. For him, it's more than enough. Even if I might make errors and it might not seem like enough to others, we can always make it right. Additionally, in order to make his finger fit that ring, he consumed a lot of food throughout his recuperation. He'll take over for me. What is the issue then? I sobbed and am on sick leave right now due to extremely swollen eyes. I appreciate you reading. Heh, not quite yet. I realize I talk too much, but I want to end by wishing everyone who encounters a similar circumstance understands that it's common to feel that it's hard to advocate for oneself. If it takes a while, that's okay. It's not always easy to navigate challenging situations, but if you choose to do so, you will demonstrate your worth as a person by actively navigating and advocating for yourself. You erred, learned from it, and was able to rectify it. It's something to be proud of since it's easier stated than done. Thus, maintain your composure and persevere. For real now, I appreciate you reading. I hope the upcoming year is fantastic for all of you. Story 3. A friend discovered that his daughter wasn't really his. Then we learned of his brother's 8-year affair with his wife, plans to flee together, fake passports, and $150,000 in stolen money. I'm still in shock about what occurred, which is why I'm writing this. It began like any other month would. John, David, Kyle, Jeremy, Howard, and myself are my buddies. George. Since our childhood, we have known one another. All of us are now in our late 30s or early 40s. Every month, we make an effort to meet at my beach house. It's just a pleasant spot, nothing extravagant. 2 Tails. It is a little worn, but I adore the scent of the ocean. This vintage surfboard is hung on the living room wall. Back in the day, we were all avid surfers. In any case, everyone has their belongings. I'm Mr. Organized Howard. Everything must be exactly as it is. He will correct a picture frame that is even a millimeter off. Jeremy. The Joker is him. His jokes can occasionally be a touch too personal, but at his core, he is a decent man. Because of a fight he had years ago, he has this scar on his arm. He seldom discusses it much. The silent one is Kyle. He works as an architect. Creates stunning structures. His early years were difficult, based on my understanding, but he was all right. David. He used to be in the military. His time in duty isn't discussed much, but it's clear he's seen a lot. He is solidly constructed. John. John, after all, always appeared to have everything. He drives a luxury automobile, is a successful lawyer, and always dresses nicely. The type, you know. Our gatherings are rather routine. We regularly turn on this old collection of music from our time in college. The grill belongs to Howard. No one else is permitted to handle his expensive barbecue. When it comes to barbecuing, he is really picky. Typically, we simply catch up, eat, drink a few beers, and hang around. Howard was very agitated this month. He shows us a photo of his kid Alan after taking out his phone. In the photo, Alan is frowning and appears to be rather irate. Howard claims he was called by the principal of the school. Alan seemed to be misbehaving, disrespecting others, and not paying attention to the professors. Additionally, his grades were declining. Howard was inconsolable. "I don't even know who this kid is anymore," he said again. He was very furious and devastated. We all made an effort to give guidance. Do you know? The typical children experience something like stages. Then, being Jeremy, he cracked a joke. "Maybe he's not yours, man," he continued, glancing directly at Howard. Given Howard's level of agitation, the joke was awful. I believe we all flinched a little. However, the fact that he stared straight at Howard when he said it makes it worse. Kyle then simply replied, "Why don't you all just get a DNA test?" In his typically calm manner, "Make the air clear." He said it in such a casual way, as if he were recommending that we have pizza. We all laughed it off at first. The more we laughed about it, the more we thought, why not? Even if it looked absurd. Thus, 6 mature males entered a paternity testing center the following day. We all required testing, and I had to explain that to the receptionist. It was really uncomfortable. She merely stared at me blankly when I attempted to make light of it. Adding insult to injury, we were joined by Harold, Howard's brother, and Howard's 2 nephews. The lads continued to inquire, "Uncle George, why are we here? And what will they do?" It was embarrassing. Naturally, it became a really awkward spectacle with all of our families present. There was no doubt that people were ogling. We all completed the swabs, paid the cost, and decided to meet the following week at John's place to obtain the findings. My beach home is quite different from John's. Everything is clean, simple, and contemporary, nearly flawless. It's as if no one really lives there. Everyone was obviously tense as we sat about attempting to strike up a conversation. Since he initiated it all, Howard took his results first. We all understood that despite his bravery, he was deeply concerned about Alan. Jeremy's joke had hurt him more than he cared to acknowledge. I saw his countenance change from one of worry to one of pure relief as he ripped open the package. 99.99%. Slumping back in his chair, he exhaled. He had Alan. He even gave a little laugh. He said as he ran his hands through his hair that he was going to ground the child for a month for causing him such anxiety. The other outcomes matched expectations as well. However, we continued to look at John in anticipation of his next move. He was remarkably silent, and it was clear that he was drinking more than normal. When he did speak, he was still standing there. "I don't own Jenna." The document was slid across the table by him. He almost knocked over his glass because his hands were trembling so much. The fact that John stood there looking at nothing just made it worse. It was as if he was attempting to interpret figures that were not real. 25.0%. Like a broken record, he continued to whisper. Then, in a sense, hell broke free. A glass smashed on the floor after Howard knocked it over in horror. The first joker, Jeremy, appeared to wish to be swallowed whole by the earth. Kyle simply shut his eyes, as if he were attempting to ignore everything. David. It appeared as though he was about to punch something, and since I knew my children were mine, I had a wave of nauseous relief. However, John's anguish was just terrible. Everything seemed unreal. For hours we sat there. The fallout was chaotic. Alicia, John's wife, on the offensive. She barged into John's office first. John told me about it, but I wasn't present. She was yelling at him, accusing him of lying, and creating a big commotion in front of his coworkers. For him, it was really embarrassing. She then made an attempt to win Maria, my wife, over to her cause. She arrived at our place in tears and tried to make up a tale about how John was misinterpreting things and that it was all a huge error. But Maria's really sharp. She soon saw through Alicia's deception. Alicia contradicted herself and kept altering her tale. Later, Maria informed me that she simply felt a really negative feeling from her. Alicia attempted phoning Kyle late at night as her next strategy. She was crying and pleading with him for assistance, claiming that John was destroying her life. Kyle, being the good-hearted person he is, spent some time listening to her. However, he made no promises. The next day, when he informed me about it, we were all beginning to see how deceitful Alicia was. Dribs and drabs of the truth emerged. Alicia first accused Stephen of having an affair. John's brother was a one-time occurrence. a sign of vulnerability. Naturally, John didn't think she was real. He conducted some research and may have even engaged a private investigator. He would not confirm. He discovered that the relationship was far more extensive and prolonged than Alicia had acknowledged. Their home was the scene of the last altercation. John later told us about it, but I wasn't present. At last, Alicia opened up about everything. The affair had begun prior to their wedding and had continued intermittently for years. She also acknowledged that she had been covertly giving Stephen money because he was having severe financial difficulties, John's funds. And things worsened. It wasn't merely a passing fancy. John believed he was supporting his family by working late and meeting them at hotels. On occasion, they even drive John's car. Together, they commemorated Jenny's birthday, just the two of them posing as a happy couple while taking photos. Stephen had been giving Jenna pricey presents that John could never afford, all of which were purchased with money that was essentially stolen from John just days before John's family celebration. He appeared to be attempting to purchase Jenna's love. Lastly, the lowest blow. When she was actually out with Stephen, she would pretend to be working late and tell John so. The financial situation was even more chaotic. Alicia had been giving Stephen enormous family loans. He had wasted the money on foolish purchases, poor investments, and gambling. A sports car, an expensive watch. They were business expenses, he said. On some of the loan documents, Alicia had even falsified John's signature. To hide their tracks, they made fictitious receipts and invoices. John discovered emails between them discussing their plans to flee their husbands together. Everything was presented in black and white. After everything began to surface, Alicia began frantically reaching out to everyone in an attempt to limit the damage. She gave me a call. She called my wife. She even tried to get in touch with my parents. It was pathetic. The whole thing culminated at Jenna's birthday party. It was this lavish affair at a fancy restaurant. Everyone was there pretending to be happy. Stephen was there acting all smug and touchy-feely with Alicia. It was making John visibly angry. He kept clenching and clenching his fists. He stood near the exit the entire time, like he was waiting for Stephen to make a run for it. Then, during the toasts, Stephen had the nerve to stand up and thank John for being such a great brother and provider. He knew it was all a lie. He gave Jenna this ridiculously expensive gift, probably bought with John's money. He even started bragging to some of the other guests about his supposed business successes, making John look bad in comparison. That was the breaking point. John stood up, grabbed the DNA test results from his pocket, and held them up for everyone to see. He announced loud and clear, 25.0% probability. He then proceeded to give the short, furious speech, laying out everything Alicia and Stephen's affair, the lies, the stolen money he even showed. Everyone printed out screenshots of their emails and photos, the ones where they were planning their future together. He made sure everyone knew about the watch, the car, the lavish parties, and the fake business trip to a tropical island. John's mother-in-law gasped and fainted. His father-in-law tried to punch John, but thankfully some other guests held him back. Stephen tried to sneak out the back, but John's father, who like David is ex-military, saw him and knocked him to the ground. It wasn't pretty. Some people tried to help. Others just stood there, mouths gaping, watching the whole thing occur. The cops were summoned, but they didn't actually do anything. They stated it was a domestic disagreement. I learned later that someone had captured the whole thing on their phone and uploaded it online. It wasn't any of us. The backlash was fast and terrible. John's father was outraged. He refused to talk to Stephen. He proceeded to Stephen's flat, where his wife also lived, gathered up all of his possessions and dumped them. Outside the flat belonged to Stephen's and John's dad. He subsequently sent a message to the entire family that he no longer regarded Stephen his son. He did, however, chat to John. He told him he was disappointed in how things had turned out, but that he still loved him. Stephen's wife Kelly was a different tale. She did more than shout. She did something. She locked all of their joint accounts and filed for divorce right away, denying Stephen access to any further funds. She did more than just hire a lawyer. She approached Alicia at John's house, smacked her across the face, shouted at her, and pulled out large clumps of her hair. I can't say I faulted her, but I'm not endorsing violence. Later, Kelly began going to therapy in an attempt to process the trauma. Conversely, John pulled back. He visited one of his beach properties rather than mine, although it wasn't as safe for him as it had been. It had the feel of a jail. He refused to pick up his phone. No one would see him. He spent hours gazing out at the water while placing an internet food purchase. Later, he informed me that the entire scenario, including the DNA test, had given him nightmares. He thought quite seriously about selling the home and killing himself in a distant wilderness. However, he was unable to bring himself to do it. Too many memories. In an attempt to dull the ache, he began drinking excessively. He stopped changing his clothing and shaved. He simply gave up. Stephen and Alicia, meantime, were residing at John's home. After being evicted from the flat, he apparently moved in. They pretended that nothing had occurred. They were observed going shopping and purchasing pricey clothing and other items. They were even making plans to get away, figuring out how to escape the disaster that they made. It was repulsive. John was having a hard time making ends meet as they ordered pricey takeaway every night. The neighbors were disturbed by their boisterous celebrations. Even though Alicia knew she could have to leave at any time, she began remodeling Jenny's room, and that guy Stephen began parking his vehicles in John's driveway. John began experiencing panic episodes. They were triggered just by seeing Alicia and Stephen together. He no longer looked after himself. He wasn't taking a shower, wasn't getting enough food. He unintentionally damaged a framed picture of Jenna one day. He didn't even appear to realize that he had wounded his palm very badly on the shattered glass. At that point, his pals and I realized we needed to take action. I hosted a meeting for us. With John's assistance, Howard brought all the bank statements, the falsified papers, all of them. He showed us more than simply them. Papers were strewn all over the table as he tossed them. He was furious. "I want to beat the shit out of Stephen," Jeremy remarked. David even made a joke about making them vanish because of his military experience. I believe he was making a joke. In any case, the normally cool-headed Kyle was trembling with rage. We argued, spoke, and tried to decide what to do for hours. We discussed the morality and legalities of it all. Howard performed some study. He researched everything, including eviction processes and landlord-tenant rules. He devised a scheme. In a sense, Jeremy would be the muscle. David devised a contingency plan in case things didn't work out. To indicate that the task was over, we even used the code word pineapple. I simply listened to it entire while wearing a Pikachu mask. The next step was to get John out of the way so he wouldn't turn up by mistake until we had completed our planned task. We didn't just ask him to join us for a barbecue. That would have raised too many questions. Kyle acted as though he required legal counsel from John on a complex property matter. Given John's occupation, the justification made sense. In order to divert John's attention from the true situation, we made sure to keep him busy with lots of food and drink and to keep the discussion continuing. The others went to John's residence in the meanwhile. It was a heated exchange. Alicia started acting like the victim right away, weeping and claiming that we had no right to be there. Despite his best efforts to appear strong, Stephen's eyes were filled with terror. We documented the catastrophe by taking photos and videos of everything, the pricey things they purchased with John's funds. We discovered further proof, pictures of them on covert trips, records indicating that they intended to purchase a home together. Not only did we carefully pack their goods as we were getting rid of them, but we also flung them out the window, making a massive pile of clothing, shoes, and other items we could locate. Stephen was being yelled at by Jeremy, who was calling him all the derogatory names in the book and threatened to harm him if he ever again approached Jenna or John. Alicia had been hiding a stockpile of pricey items, which I discovered. "Here's your blood money," I replied, tossing it at her feet. Alicia began shouting and weeping hysterically, threatening to call the police. Jeremy intervened and gently told her that John was the only owner of the house. She had no legal right to be there since they had a prenuptial agreement written before they were married. At last, Howard shoved Stephen against the garage door and slapped him across the face, calling him a jerk. John and Kyle waited back at my beach home. I sent him the word pineapple via SMS. At last, he informed John that it was time to return him to his true home. Kyle described John as a jumble of feelings: anger, relief, fear, shame. His driving was irregular. He was speeding, pausing, and then speeding again. He continued to grumble to himself, mentally reliving the last 8 years of his life. in an attempt to make sense of everything. The thought of what this would do to Jenna frightened him. It was a scene when they arrived at the house. Golf clubs, chairs, and piles of clothing. The front lawn was littered with everything that belonged to Alicia and Stephen. The entire event was witnessed by the neighbors. It resembled a hellish yard sale. Red-faced and enraged, Alicia stood there yelling at John. She blamed him for everything, claiming that he was a horrible guy and that he was wrecking her life. Stephen was just standing behind her, staring shamefully at the floor. He remained silent. Not even John acknowledged them. Then, as if they weren't there, he simply strolled by them. He entered the home. The silence seemed uncanny. Of course, all the furniture was still in place. However, everything was gone, including the small details that made it their home. Instead of the house where he had spent years living with his family, it felt like he had entered a set model home. He gently took in everything as he moved from room to room. The hardest thing was the emptiness. Later, he informed me, it hit him hard at that point. They were really gone. Jenna was safely away at her best friend's house for a planned playdate that day as the mayhem broke out at John's place. At Jenna's school, her friend's mother was one of the few parents who could see past Alicia's facade and had always shown John kindness. We informed her of what was going to happen at the house, so she purposefully planned this playdate. She was perplexed when she got back. John had to give all the details. "My true father, his Uncle Stephen," she inquired. "John was ill. Don't you love me anymore?" she questioned. He sobbed and assured her that nothing would ever make him stop loving her. However, Alicia returned and forcibly removed Jenna, and we were unable to stop her. That first night, John was by himself. The next day, he informed us that he had spent the entire time sitting on Jenny's bed, simply gazing at her paintings and toys. It was among the most difficult things he had ever done. He remained in the room of his daughter. The weeks that followed were a haze. John wasn't feeling well. He had both good and bad days. It helped that he began visiting a therapist. I believe he made an effort to stay occupied by immersing himself in his work. He picked up his guitar, which he hadn't played in years. In an attempt to relive part of his former life, he even went surfing a couple of times. His buddies and I supported him through every stage. We made sure he was eating and kept a close eye on him. When he needed it, they dragged him out of the home. What does Jenna think of me now? That was the most pressing issue that John couldn't get out of his head. He was terrified that she would blame him and believe he had deserted her. Does she believe I left her? He kept asking himself. Will I ever get her forgiveness for what transpired? He was unable to ask her outright. Not quite yet. She had spent months preparing for her school dance recital, which he had missed. Although he felt awful about it, he was unsure of how to approach her, how he was going to justify his absence. The guilt was too much to bear. His only want was to embrace his young daughter and reassure her that everything will be well. However, he was uncertain if it would be. He was uncertain if he would survive. However, John was not able to fight this conflict by himself. Nothing like this could have been managed by any one of us alone. It wasn't just us either. The men who came together in support of John, our spouses. And they were amazing. They took significant action after realizing how much John was hurting. They weren't only expressing sympathy. They were doing something. They went straight up to Alicia. They made it clear to her that they were aware of her actions and would not allow her to escape punishment. They were a formidable presence. They looked after John as well. His favorite books, snacks, and a handwritten message from each of them expressing their support were all included in the care package they prepared for him. To make sure he was eating something other than takeaway, they alternated in preparing his meal. They ensured that he was not left alone. He is always invited to movie evenings and family get-togethers. Anything to lift his mood. Since he was family, they treated him as such. I don't believe John ever anticipated that degree of support, and it had a profound impact. It demonstrated to him that he was not fighting this battle alone. His pals and I had also been plotting in secret. Knowing that John would require a competent attorney, we had been combining our funds. After doing some investigation, we had located one. Someone who specialized in custody, divorce, and high-conflict situations. This attorney has a track record of success and outcomes. We told John that we were all on the same page and gave him a retainer money. John was first apprehensive. He was afraid of making Jenna's situation worse. He feared that he might lose her entirely. What if I fight this and lose? He asked again. What happens if she comes to despise me even more? Despite our understanding of his anxieties, we refused to let him give up. We told him that biology had nothing to do with fatherhood. It has to do with love, about supporting your child, about giving a caring and secure home. We advised him that he must continue to make the decision to be Jenny's father every day, no matter what. We assured him that she deserved him and that he deserved to remain in her life. John at last consented. Despite his continued fear, he was adamant that he would stand up for Jenna. He wanted the judge to be aware of the truth about Alicia and Stephen, their deceit, and selfishness. He wished to keep Jenna safe from them. For John, the divorce procedure was a nightmare. It took over 18 months. Even though the lawyer we engaged said it would likely take 6 to 8 months, Alicia resisted him at every turn. She denied all of it, the custody agreements and the distribution of assets, even attempted to assert that she owned a portion of the house. No, it wasn't. Prior to their marriage, John's grandmother had given it to him. She repeatedly asked for paperwork extensions, missed appointments, and dragged out every meeting. Alicia would always throw another wrench in the works, just when we thought it was almost finished. She attempted to argue that John was an unsuitable father because he earned too much money from someone who had been having extramarital affairs with his brother. Even though he had just begun drinking regularly after learning of her treachery, she attempted to use this as leverage against him. However, things quickly became serious once John's attorney showed the court all of the falsified paperwork. At least 10 separate loan documents totaling more than $150,000 had been signed by Alicia under false pretenses. The judge no longer viewed this as solely a divorce matter. This was outright deception. They discovered proof that she had been sending money to Stephen for years while hiding her activities with fictitious company invoices. After John's attorney sent them the proof, the district attorney became involved. Alicia was ultimately charged with fraud and forgery. She attempted to argue that she was coerced into it by Stephen. She ultimately accepted a plea bargain that included 3 years of probation and required financial counseling. She also had to repay all of the money she had taken. Additionally, the court limited the frequency of her visits with Jenna to every other weekend and only during the day. No staying the night. Jenna cannot be taken out of state. Additionally, a guardian assigned by the court had to oversee every visit. Although it was severe, she got off easy considering what she had done. In terms of the judicial system, Stephen was not as fortunate as Alicia. He faced the same accusations as she did for faking documents and stealing John's money once the financial fraud proof surfaced. However, the judge rejected his justifications, and Alicia was placed on probation. Stephen was sentenced to real prison time. They had to repay what they had taken in 2 years, similar to Alicia. However, being incarcerated prevented him from immediately beginning to repay it. The problem with Stephen and Alicia's relationship is that it completely collapsed when they were smacked by the law and no longer had John's money to play with. Alicia began accusing Stephen of manipulating her and taking full responsibility for everything. The idea of being broke was too much for Stephen. They screamed about how they destroyed each other's lives during a heated argument in court. Hell for 16 months. However, John's divorce was finalized. We all went out to celebrate the day it was decided. John was quiet that evening. He simply sat there with a relieved, worn-out expression on his face. It was done. At last, he could begin to reconstruct his life. Jen. The thing that hurts me the most is that, for a while, she found everything difficult. Who wouldn't? She was assisted by a therapist in realizing that John was still her father, even if Stephen was her biological father. John shared this chat with me. Jenna had questioned him about if she could still call him dad. After that, he claimed to have sobbed for an hour. Everyone but John was astonished that she didn't want to spend much time with Stephen. She rapidly saw that Stephen had contributed to the harm done to her father, the only biological parent she had ever known. During supervised visits, she had turned down Stephen's attempts to offer her pricey presents. Clever child. She expressed her complete disinterest in spending time with Stephen to the supervisor designated by the court. Slowly, a new normal began to emerge in life. It was a sort of celebration when we had our final BBQ at my beach cottage. John expressed his gratitude to us for all of our efforts. He was finally getting better when he cracked a joke, a self-deprecating one. All of the children were laughing as he played with them and threw them into the air. His love for being a father was evident. "You guys are my family," he replied, glancing at us. He meant it too. Our friendship was more than that. This crazy, unreal encounter had united us like brothers. I suppose the story's lesson, if there is one, is that supportive friends will always be there for you. They will be there to support you even if your life falls apart.